Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, I just want to rewind the clock to start this video back to Friday afternoon, and we're going to talk in a few moments about the weather conditions that produced this very large high-pressure system that was spinning here off the west coast and what it did across the west coast of the United States over the weekend. But before I do that, I want to draw your attention back to last Friday to this low-pressure system that was developing right here in parts of Canada, because on the backside of this through Alberta, we saw some incredibly strong winds. And these are what those winds look like through that part of Canada. I want to thank all of these folks for posting this stuff to Twitter so that we could see the impacts that these stronger winds, these long-lasting strong winds were having on parts of the Canadian prairies here and Canadian agriculture. And the winds really doing their best here to kind of ruin end-of-season harvest here. And the video on the right showing one of our grain bins just being tossed like it's nothing here across an open field. So it was a pretty serious situation on Friday with these very strong winds on the backside of this low pressure system. And as we look here at a broader picture of what happened on the day on Sunday, so let's just fast forward to Sunday here. This is from a satellite called MODIS. Now MODIS sits on a platform called EOS Aqua. It's also on EOS Terra, but these are the Aqua images here. And a couple things to point out globally. One, we do have a tropical cyclone that is moving into the Arabian Sea and then eventually into the Gulf of Oman, which is over here. Secondly, big disturbance sitting out here in the central Atlantic. We're going to talk about that and what's right next to it right over here in a few moments. But what I really want to do is I want to zoom in right on this side of the United States over here in California. But before I do that, just a couple of neat things to point out. MODIS can almost cover the whole planet in a day. The little black slits you see there is that the swath width isn't wide enough right across the equator to capture every inch of the planet here. And the little stripes you see that I'm kind of circling in here, these are all sun glint. That's where the sun is actually reflecting off of the ocean surface and coming back directly to the satellite. It's essentially kind of blinding it, if you will. But in this circle right up in here, I want to show you what we got our high resolution view of, and that is the Kincaid fire, which is north of San Francisco here. And that particular fire was quite nasty over the weekend. At least to the stuff I've heard early this morning on Monday morning, it's about 5% contained. It's burned about 90 square miles. And this video from Amy Larson shows one point over the weekend where we saw some incredible smoke from this particular fire. It was moving quite rapidly. The National Weather Service out of the Bay Area captured these videos that they wanted to share with us here just to show you the wind-driven smoke and how quickly the fire can spread when the conditions are like they were, which was extremely low relative humidity and very, very strong winds we saw over the weekend. Now, what's interesting about this is to put this fire in perspective. California spent the last 6+ months drought-free, which means these fires, which can be made worse by long-standing drought, can still happen despite having, a drought-free summer in this case. Now remember, summer is the dry season for California anyway, and when we have these conditions come in with extremely low relative humidity and strong winds, fires like this can most certainly happen. Now, before I finish talking about California, I just want to make a point here. Over the weekend, we saw extremely heavy rains that kind of were born out of the Gulf of Mexico and rode on a cutoff low that went through the country like this. So even though this map is showing you the latest drought monitor, remember it was released or created on October 22nd, which was last Tuesday. And we saw some very heavy rain in through this sector, which is going to improve the drought situation. And we're anticipating more heavy rain here over the drought-parched regions of the southeast and mid-Atlantic as well in the coming days. But just to show you that drought monitor class change, now this goes back over the last 6 months, we can see that parts of Texas, parts of the southeast have made multiple class degradations here over the last several months here. But California, just to point out, didn't have much of a change at all over this particular summer. Now, what we're looking at in the near term is still critical levels, elevated levels, extreme levels of fire, and this is all brought on by extremely low relative humidities. This is what the relative humidity will look like by this evening across California. We see a lot of single-digit relative humidities here, down into that 4, 5, 6, 7% range. And we're going to combine that with some very strong winds over the next couple of days. We're watching wind gusts now. This is getting through Tuesday midday into the evening hours and through Wednesday morning. So our fire threat isn't going anywhere with these stronger winds and lower relative humidities here in the near term. Okay. Now for us in the midsection of the country, I want to thank Mike for sending me this particular image here of sunset here in Nebraska. Just brilliantly red sunsets. We can get these for several reasons in the midsection of the country this time of year. Mike's was probably due to the harvest efforts, putting a lot of particulate matter, putting a lot of dust and debris into the sky. And when the sun sets, it's just the red wavelength of light that can really survive that, the reds and the yellows and some of the oranges. But Mike, I'm going to tell you, your air quality over the next several hours here is going to be degraded as well. We have quite a bit of what appears to be dust, I think, coming out of the southwest, spreading into the midsection of the United States. I don't think this is smoke in particular from the fires. This is coming again out of this region, blowing across the midsection of the country. So you might get a couple of more brilliant sunsets here because of this. But you can see as I let this continue to play where the smoke from that fire just north of San Francisco Bay, the Kincaid fire, will be taking its smoke. So air quality issues in California continue to be a major problem. Now, as we get into this forecast, take a look at the flow pattern here. What this is highly amplified flow. And when I show it to you like this, I want you to remember we often talk about the flow of the atmosphere being zonal, which is kind of like this branch down here, coming more or less out of the west going toward the east, or more meridional, which means it's got a bigger north-south component. Highly amplified flow. When I say that combination of words, I'm talking here about meridional flow like this. And what we need to understand is what this particular pattern means in terms of our precipitation in the coming days, because this is what it meant for us over the last week. Much of the precipitation you see in this area here was over the weekend, specifically on Friday into Saturday, where we were drawing an abundant amount of moisture that originated in the Bay of Campeche, met up with a cutoff low that tracked right in through here. And as that moisture came in, we had just, rain upon rain upon rain in some locations in the last week here, easily picking up 6+ inches of rain, as you can see, and even stretching up into parts of the eastern Corn Belt. We saw pockets of 2 to 4 inches of rain across a broad sector here. So that was just what we had over the last 7 days. Now, this is what we're looking at in terms of precipitable water. So this tells me how much moisture is in the atmosphere to be precipitated out over the next 15 days or so. And you notice California is continuing to stay on the drier side of things, with much of the moisture, these big atmospheric rivers coming up into the Gulf of Alaska, not taking aim on California. We really don't even see that all the way out to mid part of the month. So we're anticipating things staying dry on that side of the country. But as you probably saw in the midsection of the United States, we had a little bit different story. So let's get right into this with our all hazards weather map. Throughout the day today, our main snow threat is going to be confined here to our mountain areas here in the Rocky Mountains, but then coming out of Colorado into the Central Plains. We're going to talk about that in a few seconds. Elsewhere, much of the colors that you see over here on the West Coast are high wind related or fire danger related, but it is cold enough up here in Northern California and coastal Oregon to bring out the frost and freeze advisories as well. Okay, so seeing this, what are we anticipating in the near term? Well, what I want to play for you here, let's get this started right early in the morning. We're going to be watching for widespread snow showers, maybe some locally heavier snow squalls here in the mountains as our next system takes form. Now, remember what the jet stream is doing. It's diving like this and then pulling to the northeast. So as it does so, we get some favorable upper level conditions to be producing precipitation. It's going to be right along this boundary that we're going to see that. So by noon today, snow spreading here into the high plains here in Colorado, and then eventually over into parts of Nebraska and Kansas. Now, as this system late this afternoon gets here into the Central Plains, again, widespread scattered snow showers in this area, not big snowfall amounts, but by this evening could be moving through Kansas, eastern Nebraska, northwestern tip of Missouri, and then into Iowa. So this is now in the evening and overnight hours. Out ahead of it, rain, but on the backside, cold enough to be bringing in some snow into this area. So we can see that that was going to push through Iowa and then into Wisconsin. Now, we are not anticipating heavy snow out of this, no major snowfall amounts. And on the warmer side of it, rainfall. Okay, but outside of that, we just have a little bit more snow in the mountains here, and we could see some broad scattered showers down here in parts of the Florida Panhandle, Alabama, and Georgia as well. Now, that system moves on through. And what we see next is See the broader shield of precipitation over the southeast? That's a clue as to the moisture transport for the system that starts to take shape early Wednesday morning. And what we see here is enough cold air on the backside. We're going to be getting more snow over parts of Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas, also coming out of Wyoming. And then this is going to spread on the north side of this as we get past Wednesday. And let me show you what that looks like. Now I'm going to show you the GFS model because through the next 6 days, both the GFS and the European are in great agreement about this. So this is now 7 a.m. on Wednesday where we left off with the other animation. You can see right in through here where our rain snow line is going to be. And as I press forward here, we see spreading through Kansas, southeastern Nebraska, northwestern Missouri, into Iowa, into northern parts of Illinois, Wisconsin, and then into Michigan. That seems to be the corridor on which we could be seeing some heavier snowfall amounts. So from Colorado through Michigan as this Colorado low sneaks through here. Now, on the southern side of this, from Texas through the lower Mississippi River Valley into the Mid-South and eventually over to the Mid-Atlantic, we could be getting some very heavy rainfall out of this as well. And I'll show you those rainfall totals in just a few moments. But that is our next storm system moving through by the time we get to the end of this week. Now let's take a look at what the GFS ensemble shows up in terms of snowfall. Taking you back here, this is what we're anticipating in terms of the probability of getting 3 inches of snow by Tuesday evening. So there's a swath in through here that may get a couple of inches of snow in this area. Certainly here in Colorado, though, very easy to get that amount of snow by Tuesday evening. But the next system is now emerging out of Colorado Tuesday evening. And I'll stop this right here at about, let's just take you all the way out to Sunday 1 a.m. And we can see the swath of where we could expect to see some heavier snowfall amounts. Again, this is the probability of getting at least 3 inches. So we can see when we get into these yellow colors here, we're at 60%. Into the reds, we're between 70 and 95%. So there is pretty good ensemble agreement about that snow. And just to show you, this is over the next week from the GFS ensemble. This is the European ensemble. They are in very good agreement on the placement of that heavier snowfall swath there. And we can see that it does stretch up eventually into the Great Lakes states, bringing in, again, a pretty good chance of getting 3 inches. Now, just to show you, this is the probability of getting 6 inches of snow. So it is possible there's enough moisture in this to bring some heavy snowfall amounts to parts of Colorado, but this extends right along that main axis we just drew there with a 3-inch probability. So this will be a heavy, wet snow, but we're going to keep a close eye on it throughout this week to see how that snow emerges midweek and where its heaviest locations will be. So we got to keep a close eye out on this system midweek this week. So precipitation totals, GFS on the left, European over here on the right. Very good agreement overall through the next week. You can kind of pick your location and see the amounts. Where I do see some differences are going to be down here in parts of the southeast. You can see that the European model is much wetter over this corridor than the GFS's. But overall, we're seeing a very similar picture being painted by our models. For the week 2, right now at this point, we don't see any major, I'm talking big low pressure systems sweeping through the midsection of the United States, forming off the Rocky Mountains. So what you're looking at here is week 2 precipitation anomalies from the GFS and from the European over here on the right. Pretty darn good agreement overall. So I'm impressed after last week's problems, what we're now seeing with better model agreement here. So let's turn our attention over to temperatures. We've got a very cold morning sitting inside of that trough that's over the western United States, and you can see some of the temperatures here getting down into the teens. Now, as we move this cold air to the east over the coming days, it's going to do so in this deeper trough feature right in through there. So we notice by the time we get out here to about the 5th of November, what we've got ourselves into here is a situation with more broad ridging across the western United States and into the Gulf of Alaska, and a deeper trough that tends to sit and spin here. This is partly the reason why week 2 does look a little drier, is because this side of a trough saving Hudson Bay tends to be the drier side of it. That is, as long as we don't bring any little short waves out on this side to loop around it. And at this point, we're not seeing that for week 2. So taking a look at our temperatures here over the next 5 days, yep, inside of that deeper trough, we are very cold compared to average. Some locations 20 to 30 degrees colder than average. So that minus there is compared to average. But given the highly amplified flow, remember what it's doing? It's doing this. we still have the warmth here across the eastern half of the, eastern corridor of the United States. But that is changing in the 6 to 10 day time period as the cold kind of finally penetrates all the way down to the southeast. And looking out here into the 11 to 15 day time period, much of our cold will be situated over the Canadian prairies with some cold air intrusion sweeping down in the central plains, maybe making its way all the way to the mid-south as we get into that time period. So certainly hanging on to this highly amplified colder side of things here for much of the eastern half of North America. Okay. All right. Just to finish things up, I want to let you know something that happened over the weekend. Pablo formed, Tropical Storm Pablo here. It is the second northernmost latitude for a system to reach hurricane intensity. So right here, it's amazing to see where its position is located. Just wanted to show you some interesting stuff here with with our tropical systems. Nothing going on over here right now, though. These are historical hurricane tracks in each one of those red dots. So to finish up, we'll talk briefly about South America. We're continuing to see the same patterns emerge here in South America, both the European and the GFS wanting to paint this side still on very dry, with much wetter conditions down here in northern Argentina, Paraná, and Uruguay. So this seems to be the wetter corridor of things. So that seems to be the long-standing story here, delaying planting of soybeans, which is of course going to delay our planting of our safrinha crops. And just to show you the difference between this year and last year, this is what we're currently looking at in terms of our vegetative health index compared to a year ago. So we are certainly on this side of our color scale throughout much of Brazil's major growing regions. We'll talk about some of the major details controlling the flow of the atmosphere, especially over South America, when we get into our more technical analysis, which will be released on Wednesday. But we'll go ahead and leave this one right here. I want to thank you for your attention. Hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you.